Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of Rendezvous with Anza Saqib on CxO Global TV. CxO Global Forum is a knowledge sharing platform for all C-levels across the globe. We take massive pride in contributing to the global knowledge economy with our league of extraordinary thought leaders. Today as well, we've got an extremely accomplished gentleman joining us. His name is Mr. Rehan Qadri. He's the CIO at KHAAS Corp. So, without further ado, let's get to know him better. Yes, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, so, we know, mashallah, you've got a great profile, you've won many awards, but what the audience would be interested in is knowing a little bit about your journey. So, where did you grow up? What courses did you study at university? What was your professional journey like? How did you end up here as the CIO of Khadi?
So I think first and foremost, first thing to mention here is that I'm the first person in my family to even attend the university, right? So the family background is not with a very education, or you can say a family which has formal education. So I was the first in my family to even go to the university level. I think when you have scarcity of something, then obviously it gives you motivation to prove yourself. I think this probably might have been something that has kept that triggered always. So मेरी वालदा की ख्वाहिश ये थी. So she used to see dramas and everything. और जब वो convocations होते थे, so she used to fantasize the convocations and people wearing the gowns and everything. So her motivation gave me motivation that one day probably there would be a day where I would be part of a convocation, and I'll make her proud by by being part of that convocation. So I think इस इन कुछ चीजों ने थोड़ा motivate किया to go for learning and try to achieve more with time. Schooling local. जी.
What was your first job? Where did you first start with?
So my first job was with CDC, Central Depository Company of Pakistan, and I usually call it CDC University. So जब मैंने वो job start की, and the way I was able to sort of either apply my learnings or and that institution sort of made me realize on certain occasions कि जो आपने यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ा है और जो दुनिया है उसमें बहुत फर्क है. So wherever the gaps were, that institution helped me identify those gaps. I think if my first job would not have been in CDC University, then probably I feel I would not have been where I am today. So उस institution ने काफी सिखाया, काफी चीजों को validate करवाया और काफी practical aspects से चीजें learn करने का मौका दिया. That's why I call it CDC University.
Right. And how did you end up becoming the CIO at Khadi?
So when I started my career, I used to be a very techie kind of a person. कभी सोचा नहीं था कि कभी I'll be the CIO. I always thought myself as a techie who would be growing in always in programming, always in technology, latest technologies. But वक्त के साथ, I think when I moved from CDC to another organization, which is UBL Fund Managers, so I think that path to that CIO was created there. One of my mentors, who used to be the CTO of UBL Fund Managers, he moved to another organization. And this is where he actually recommended me for that CTO position in UBL Fund Managers. I think this was the triggering point where that path towards that CIO position started. So UBL Fund Managers, I had grown to become a CTO. But when you go in certain direction, you get to learn what are the dynamics of that position. So I think that was the triggering point which enabled me to actually become CIO of Khadi.
Sir, Khadi is Pakistan's first and one of the largest fast fashion brands. One can only imagine how busy the CIO of such a big brand may be keeping. But what does your day-to-day role entail?
Okay, so when I so khadi fast fashion ka lafz in just literal terms fast fashion acha lagta hai, but khadi is one of the organization which capitalizes on both fast and fashion as well. So a very fast paced organization, and I can easily say that every new day is actually a new day. The entrepreneur who is actually running the organization, Shamoon Sultan, I can easily call him Steve Jobs of Pakistan. So a very visionary kind of a person. Every new day you'll have something new or something innovative to work on. But as far as I can say, if I have to say that I am a very busy person in Khadi, in literal terms, I would say this might not be the scenario. Because जब मैंने खाड़ी join किया, there was a time when we used to say to ourselves that within IT, only 30% of the time we would be investing in routine operations and routine scenarios. 70% of the time has to be invested on innovations, on learning and doing new things. And the organization seriously enables us to focus on innovation, to focus on the fast-paced delivery of many new innovative technologies. So जिस दिन हमें ये लगता है कि हमने 30% से ज्यादा टाइम अपना रूटीन टास्क में engage किया है, so everyone comes to help that person who has gone so routine that he has to invest 30%, more than 30% of the time in day-to-day operations.
Sounds wonderful. So moving on, how do you view the e-commerce and m-commerce infrastructure in Pakistan? Like, what are some of your policy recommendations?
So when I became the CIO of Khadi, one of the very so वो period और COVID का period was actually बड़ा करीब का period है वो. So this is where we sort of started focusing more and more on e-commerce technology. So in fact, I am also the director of international commerce business for Khadi. So CIO and commerce. So one part is technology and one part is commercial. So yes, e-commerce business, I would still say is is at a very novice stage when it comes to the framework or the ecosystem of e-commerce. बहुत सारे I think issues हैं जिनको बहुत सारे startups, now upcoming startups, are trying to sort out.
Yes, Mr. Rehan Qadri, we're unable to hear you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, he'll be joining again shortly. There he is. Yes, sir. Are you back with us online?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm not sure कहाँ तक वो cover हुआ, but I was just referring to a point where with the help of SBP, FBR, and all the e-commerce businesses, there was an ecosystem formed to enable the export even or growth outside Pakistan too. And that international e-commerce is also improving a lot. But when you work with those international regions where e-commerce ecosystems have grown at a faster pace, so just for an example, UK, I would say it's a fairly less cumbersome, very customer friendly, or very trustworthy kind of a ecosystem where even UK, it's 30% business comes from e-commerce business. But Pakistan में जब तक ये ecosystem improve नहीं होता, which is improving with time. Lots of startups are actually playing their role, bringing in the technologies in Pakistan, where on the banking on which the ecosystems of Pakistan would improve. But I think one of the cornerstones, until and unless ये चीज improve नहीं होती, I think we would still lag in terms of the kind of growth e-commerce business can bring in. COD is one, the cash on delivery kind of a mechanism. one of the blockers when it comes to growth of e-commerce system. और उसके पीछे भी जाहिर है जो चीजें कार फर्मा है, दिस इज मेनली रिलेटेड टू द कस्टमर ट्रस्ट ऑन दैट ई-कॉमर्स चैनल.
Shopping and using financial
Yes.
transactions online.
So I think those policy factors which improves number one the infrastructure and also the customer's trust on the e-commerce business. This is the need of the time.
Right, absolutely. Sir, moving on. Now, since you are also the CIO, sir, how is digitalization transforming businesses in Pakistan? What do businesses need to keep in mind? Because we saw post-COVID, a lot of businesses were forced to go online.
So every digital transformation or transition towards digital channel that has to come with certain level of uncertainty, right? बहुत सारी investment on digital technologies इसलिए नहीं होती कि there is a level of uncertainty involved. तो या तो businesses ये देखते हैं कि किसी दूसरे ने अगर ये काम कर लिया तो then we would go, because the success rate of digital transformation or digital projects is little too low compared to when businesses invest in other domain. तो जब कोविड का पीरियड आया तो देयर वाज नो ऑप्शन, यू एक्चुअली हैड टू इन्वेस्ट इन टेक्नोलॉजीज, राइट? So yeah, either you do go into uncertainty based on no option, or you take a leap of faith when you have to go into that digital domain. So I think that COVID scenario helped us push our investments into that digitalization or the technology. So I think यही reason है कि either we'll have to take a leap of faith when it comes to technology projects delivery, or we'll have to learn from what others are doing in. But I think this COVID has set up that pace or that landscape for us. कुछ लोगों ने जब वहाँ invest किया, then they were able to realize that this is something which has to go long term.
Right, absolutely. Advice for mid-career professionals?
मेरे ख्याल से आज जो लोग मिड करियर की स्टेट पर होंगे वो जनरेशन होगी जो आज की जनरेशन नहीं है. So I think one of the factors I feel, including me and some of the mid-career professionals, would be कि हम ये सोचते हैं कि and this might be very crude, but since I have felt this in most of the mid-careers, is कि जितना पैसा मिलेगा उतना काम करेंगे, या जितनी सैलरी होगी उतना काम करेंगे. हम शायद ये नहीं सोचते कि जितना काम करेंगे उतनी अर्निंग होगी. So I think this is number one thing we as professionals we have to think, that the hard work and smart work always pays off. It might be not instantly, but you cannot stop working hard because you are not being paid for. You always have to work hard. So वो मुझे थोड़ा सा फैक्टर लगता है जब हम अपने मिड करियर में पहुंचते हैं, एंड दिस इज द स्टेज वेयर यू आर ट्रांजिशनिंग फ्रॉम अ लोअर इनकम बकेट टू अ हायर इनकम बकेट. तो वो जो माइंडसेट है, until and unless we sort of, because हमने ये सोचना है कि this is my career, probably I'm working for organization one today which is not able to compensate me for my skills, लेकिन उसके लिए मैं अपनी स्किल्स इंप्रूव करना नहीं छोड़ दूंगा. तो बहुत सारे इंटरव्यूज, बहुत सारी डिस्कशंस जो मैं अपने कोलीग्स के साथ और कुछ जूनियर्स के साथ करता हूँ, दे यूजुअली लर्न ऑन जॉब. लेकिन अगर ये सोचने की कोशिश की जाए कि हम सेल्फ लर्निंग कितनी करते हैं और वो काम वो लर्न करने की कोशिश कितना करते हैं जो हमारा काम नहीं है, जो ऑन जॉब हमें नहीं करना, that factor is very small. So we have to continue investing in our skill building, and we cannot stop working hard ever.
That's very true, sir. Basic piece of advice. Moving on, what does the word failure mean to you?
So as I call CDC University, एक अच्छी चीज जो मैंने अपने कैरियर के स्टार्ट में सीखी, और बहुत सारे मेंटोर्स होते हैं जो आपको इस तरह की चीजें सिखाते हैं जो आप बुक्स में नहीं सीख सकते या बुक्स पढ़ के नहीं सीख सकते. So one of my mentors used to say there is no word failure in reality. Either it's a success or it's a lesson learned. So if you fail and you don't learn a lesson out of that failure, then you are actually a failure. But if you got failed on something and you learned a lesson, and you will incorporate that lesson in your future endeavors, it's actually not a failure. That failure is even bigger than the successes you would get. So I think I have tried to keep that in mind. Yes, during this whole career, there were certain moments where the expected outcomes were not actually which we thought of. But always, I think I have tried to sort of distinguish failures from lessons learned, and that has helped me a lot.
Some very pertinent advice. Moving on towards the end of today's session, what do you like doing in your free time? Because as we perceive that C-levels are extremely busy and they hardly even have time for their families.
No, I would say I'm probably the people who know me, I'm a very workaholic kind of a person, right? But there is not a single weekend where I'm not going out with the family. So there is a possibility that I'm with the family and I'm still connected with business, but still I try to make sure that the time that family deserve, although my family might not agree, but and in fact, when I used to, my favorite hobby, my kid, he is now grown up, 12 years, but when he used to be small kid, 4 5 years 6 years, my favorite hobby used to be wrestling with my son, right? So I used to mention my, but अब वो इतना बड़ा हो गया कि उसके साथ wrestle करना मेरे लिए थोड़ा risky है अभी.
That's great, and we are so honored and grateful that you shared these thoughts with us today and some great words of advice. But moving on towards the end of today's session, what do you think is the utility of forums like CxO Group?
So, as I mentioned, when I started my career, I used to be a very geek or techie kind of a person. So, used to be very introvert. ख्वाहिश ये होती थी कि सुबह ऑफिस आए और अपना काम करें और घर चले जाएं और लोगों को अवॉइड करें. सो यूज टू बी दैट काइंड ऑफ अ पर्सन. But again, my mentor Ali Imran Khan, if he's on the call or whether he would listen to that talk, एक चीज की जो रियलाइजेशन हुई वो आई थिंक वाज टू स्टे कनेक्टेड विद पीपल. आई थिंक लोगों से बात करके आप जितना सीखते हैं या लोगों के साथ कनेक्ट करके और लोगों के एक्सपीरियंसेस से आप जितना सीखते हैं, self learning, you cannot never ever learn those pieces without connecting with lot many or even like minded people. जिस तरह मैंने कहा, फेलियर इज एक्चुअली अ लेसन लर्न. सो आपको कोशिश ये करनी होती है कि सारे फेलियर्स आपको अपने जिम्मे नहीं लेने. यू हैव टू लर्न लेसन फ्रॉम अदर्स फेलियर एज वेल, एंड इन ऑर्डर टू लर्न फ्रॉम अदर्स फेलियर यू हैव टू कनेक्ट विद लॉट मेनी पीपल who can share their learnings on any kind of a forum, right? So when you transition from a person who is doing a job to a person who is willing, who is responsible to manage the team or lead the team, I think this is a period where unless you are collaborating with like-minded people, you cannot transition from your individual role to a management or a leadership role. So anyone who is in this kind of a role, so I advise my team, anyone who is transitioning from individual person to management, I personally push them and get them subscribed to any of such forums. I am KHAAS board member, so mostly I direct my team members toward that direction. But yes, I think CxO provide you that leadership collaboration where all your colleagues are at the same level. You can understand them, they can understand you, and you can learn from them, and they can learn from you.
Thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it. Please keep contributing to the knowledge economy.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching, and we'll join you again tomorrow with another interesting guest. Please stay tuned and keep us updated with your comments and feedback. That's it for today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.